Hey guys, so it's election time in Japan and an interesting issue has raised its head. So one of the opposition groups has been talking a lot about Japanese first and concerns over foreigners in Japan. And apparently they've been using that to sort of get a bit of attention, and it's been working. So they've been getting a lot more support. And so perhaps in response to that, the Japanese government has started up a group or a committee to address concerns over foreigners, right? So issues such as crime and over-tourism. So apparently now there's 3.8 million foreigners living in Japan, which is sort of a record. That's the highest it's ever been, and it's 3% of the population. 3%. So it's not a huge percentage, but 3.8 million foreigners are living in Japan. And some of the issues that they're addressing are stricter requirements for driver's licenses, which is a funny one, and for buying real estate, which is a bit of a concern. So that's a bit of a worry for me. And a quote from the Prime Minister said that crimes and disorderly conduct by some foreigners, as well as inappropriate use of various administrative systems, have created a situation in which the public feels uneasy and cheated. Right? So, crimes and disorderly conduct, yeah, we've addressed the crime thing before. It's a very small percentage of the crime committed in Japan is actually committed by foreigners, but it's probably the perception of crime being committed by foreigners is probably the problem. And disorderly conduct, hard to argue with that. No doubt there's a lot of foreigners in Japan that behave in a disorderly way compared to Japanese standards, you know. Inappropriate use of various administrative systems. I'm guessing that that's going to be things like people that are not paying into the retirement fund, because everyone's supposed to pay into the retirement fund every year, and the medical insurance. There's a lot of foreigners that come here and work and get paid and don't pay their health insurance, which is mandatory. We're supposed to pay it, but the system has holes in it where, and we've talked about this before, where if people don't put their hand up and start paying the medical insurance themselves, they can get away with not doing it. I knew a guy that was here for 20 years and never paid health insurance. You know, just as a matter of interest too, guys, recently we got our health insurance bill, and it was Rokujuman, which is about it's about $6,000. So for 2 adults and 2 kids. So it is a little bit expensive, but it is also an excellent healthcare system. So, but yeah, that is probably what he's talking about there, is the foreigners that are living here and working here and not paying into the healthcare system. And probably the pension, people not paying their pension as well. Probably, I'm guessing that's what that is. So it's, I can see both sides of this. I really can. The crime and over-tourism, the over-tourism thing. I mean, obviously Japan needs tourists because the income that they get from tourism is good for the economy. But I can totally understand why some people don't like it, because, you know, for example, Kyoto, we've lost all interest in Kyoto. Last time I went to Kyoto would have been about, well, maybe 8-9 years ago. We went to Kyoto with some visitors that were here visiting us. We took them to Kyoto, and it was just full of tourists and foreign tourists, and it just spoils it. So Kyoto and Himeji Castle, I wouldn't go there anymore just because there's too many tourists. And occasionally we go to other places where we come across vast loads of tourists, and it you know, from a Japanese point of view, from a Japanese person who just wants to do a little bit of tourism a little bit of touring in their own country, and everywhere they go there's loads and loads of foreigners, I can understand why that would be an issue. But the other side of that is that the income's really good for the Japanese economy. So all of these things, I can see both sides. The driver's license one is a funny one. We've talked about the driver's license thing before. Some countries like Australia, because our driving rules, and we drive on the same side of the road, and it's very, very similar to what it is in Australia, almost identical, which means that they have an agreement with Australia where we can basically just swap our Australian driver's license through a Japanese one. So for us it's pretty easy, but it is fairly complex for other foreigners, and they have to do a driving test and everything else. It's hard to see. So stricter requirements for driver's licenses, hard to see what their issue is with that, because at the moment it's already pretty tough for most non-Japanese people. Pretty much have to do the same test that Japanese people have to do. So it's a funny one to focus on. But anyway, that's what they're talking about, making it harder for people to get a driver's license. And harder to buy real estate. I can see both sides of that argument too. I've always thought it was surprising how easy it is for foreigners to buy property in Japan, because that always surprised me a bit. It's like anybody can just come here and buy land. So I can sort of see why they sort of want to address that. But by the same token, you've got a huge percentage of houses are empty now because the population's shrinking, and a lot of older people are passing on and leaving these empty houses. So that, you know, we've talked about this before as well. You know, you can buy an old house out in the countryside here for $5,000. You know, because nobody wants it. Japanese people don't want it. So it's not like there's a shortage of real estate. So it's hard to know. It's hard to know whether these things are real issues or whether they're just things that they're talking points that'll sort of get them more votes for the election. It's hard to know, because it's hard to see why Japanese people would be concerned about foreigners getting a driver's license, or even the buying real estate thing, when there's more property here for sale than the Japanese people want. You know, I mean, our old farmhouse that we bought, nobody wanted it. It was actually on the market for a long time before we bought it, because nobody wanted it. Japanese people don't want to buy an old place like this. So it's hard to know if that really is an issue with Japanese people. Obviously, not many Japanese people are going to talk to me about this sort of stuff, but I haven't heard anything from anybody that would suggest either of those things are issues. The crime one, the perception of crime by foreigners is exaggerated, because obviously any crime committed by a foreigner is reported on fairly extensively, and the true statistics are rarely quoted. We made a video on the myth-busting playlist about that one. But nevertheless, I mean, if one foreigner in Japan commits a crime, then it's one too many, isn't it? So I can see both sides of that argument as well. So it's totally understandable. It is totally understandable. I get why they're concerned. However, it does sort of have a feeling about it that it's a bit of a trick. You know, this has been done for thousands of years, hasn't it? That politicians and leaders have used the xenophobia, you know, the fear of foreign people, to get votes and get power and, you know, manipulate people. So, and as a foreigner living in Japan, any of this sort of talk is unpleasant and makes me nervous and uncomfortable, because, you know, I haven't committed any crimes and, you know, I've been paying taxes here for a couple of decades and behaving myself and being a good citizen, but good resident. That's the difference. That's the difference. I'm not a citizen, I'm a resident. So I'm not a Japanese citizen, I'm a resident. So that's the difference. But the other thing is too, that the Japanese government has said, and that they've relaxed their immigration laws. It used to be very hard to get a visa to come work here, and they've relaxed it and made it easier because there's not enough workers here, because the population's shrinking. The population's shrinking, and a higher percentage of the population is over 60 years old now. Something like a third or more of the population is over 60 years old. So the working people, the number of workers is shrinking, which means, and we've talked about this before too, is all the companies and businesses are screaming for staff. Any restaurant or cafe or convenience store, or all the businesses have signs outside permanently. They're not just stuck to the window of the thing. They'll have permanent signs outside the convenience stores and the shops and the restaurants and everything. Part-time staff wanted. And they just can't get enough staff. And so those signs are there permanently because they're constantly looking for new staff. So staff shortages are a huge problem here, and the Japanese government know that, and that's why they softened the immigration laws to allow more foreigners in. So they need more foreigners in here. It's important, and if they want people to come here and work here, then those people are going to want to buy a house. and get a driver's license, right? And if they can't come here and work here and get a driver's license and buy a house and get treated like a second-class citizen, they probably won't come here, will they? So, you know, it's a bit of a dilemma, isn't it? The only other solution is that the young Japanese people, more young Japanese people, need to get married and have kids, because that's the heart of the problem. Is a lot of the young Japanese people now just aren't getting married. They're not into it. They're not interested. They're not getting married. And they're not having kids, and population's shrinking as a result. You know, and that seems to be more and more common now. That you know, people are getting 30, 40 years old, still not married, no kids, not interested. What do they say? Meiwaku is something like it's a hassle. If you say, if they're asked why haven't you got married and why aren't you having kids, and they just say it's a hassle, so they're not really interested. That's the way they see it. So that's the other solution. They could do that. They could all start having more kids and start grow the population, and then stop foreigners coming in. They could do that. But in the meantime, the Japanese government has said that they need more foreigners to come. That's why they weakened the immigration laws. So it's a bit of a thing, you know. They're sort of trying to have it both ways. They want the foreigners to come, but they also want to be able to get their votes for their elections. So they want to tell the Japanese people these things that manipulate them, you know. And fair enough too. I mean, there are some legitimate concerns. The over-tourism thing, you know, that's a legitimate concern. You know, Kyoto's become ridiculous. You know, Himeji Castle and places like that are just ridiculous now. Rows and rows and rows of buses of people. You know, it's that's fair enough. And the crime, you know, and even the bad behaviour. I mean, Japan. One of the reasons Japan's such a nice place is the crime rates are low, and it's a really orderly, pleasant society to live in. So anybody that comes here and commits a crime or behaves in an unpleasant manner shouldn't really be here. So I mean, I totally understand and support that. That's fair enough, you know. But from the point of view of people who come here and behave ourselves, any talk about not letting us buy real estate or toughening driver's licenses, I've never heard. That's the first time I've heard about this. This is fairly widely reported this week. Reuters reported it, so you'll probably see it in your international press a little bit, because Reuters reported it. When they report something, often it's picked up by other news people, and then through the English-speaking Japanese media, it's been talked about a lot. So it's hard to take it seriously when the week before the election, you know, the government recognised that this minority party has been getting an increase of support because of their Japanese first agenda, and so in response to that, they've started up this committee this week, right, just before the election, and the PM's made that statement. I'll just repeat that again so you guys don't have to go back and look for it. The Prime Minister said, crimes and disorderly conduct by some foreigners, as well as inappropriate use of various administrative systems, have created a situation in which the public feels uneasy and cheated. Be interesting to know what percentage of the public actually feel uneasy and cheated about those issues. The public makes it sound like it's everybody, doesn't it? So, but anyway, that's what's going on here. So we shall see what transpires. As a non-citizen, as a resident, permanent resident, not a citizen, I don't vote. And none of those 3% of the foreigners that they're talking about would vote, because that's the statistic is non-Japanese residents, right? So that 3% don't vote. So what we think, or if we're offended by any of this discussion, it doesn't matter, right, as far as their election's concerned. So anyway, that's it. Not the first time we've seen this, is it? This sort of thing with the Japanese first, and that sort of the foreigners are bad, and let's get rid of the foreigners. When you're on the other side of it, I've heard this for years from my Australian family and friends. They often say the same thing. Oh, there's a lot of foreigners here at the moment. There's too many foreigners, and it's sort of a natural reaction. So unless everybody in the world just stays where they're born and doesn't move, I guess this is going to be a continual problem around the world, isn't it? And no doubt what do they call that? A contentious issue. Contentious issue. I get it. I can see both sides of this. I really can. As as someone who can see, I can totally see the Japanese point of view. Absolutely. And those Japanese people who, now and again when you're somewhere here, someone will give you a bit of a look, Oh, look, and it's almost like you can see them thinking, oh, look, a foreigner, and not happy about it, you know. You do get that. You do get that. And I understand their point of view. I really do. I can understand all those concerns. I totally get it. But as a person who lives here and has been here for a long time, committed to it, with Japanese wife and Japanese kids, it leaves you feeling a bit more alienated, that sort of discussion, you know. But it's what's going to happen. It looks like there's going to be more of it. If it's getting votes, if that discussion's getting votes, then there'll be more of that discussion, won't there? You know, it's inevitable. So, but they're going to have to make up their minds. If they keep saying they want more foreigners to come here and work, so they want us to come here and work. If they want us to come here and work, they're going to have to work it out, aren't they? So anyway, let's see what happens. Ooh, we'll keep you informed. I might get marched off to some camp somewhere and locked up. If the videos stop coming, that's what's happened to me. More videos coming soon.